What is up, guys? This is not going to be an easy video for some of you to watch, um, and I apologize for that. Right now, I apologize for that, but I think that this is a really important video, possibly the most important video that I've ever made. Um, and yeah, there may be some swearing, there may be some crying in this video, but I have to do it. And yeah, if you need to put on headphones now is the time. But um, my dad unexpectedly died on November 5th. Um, he had been fighting lymphoma, and he had actually been doing really, really well. He had been through multiple forms of chemotherapy, and he was responding really well, and everything was looking actually really good. Um, and then the cancer just came back with a vengeance. It was just unbelievable. The cancer just was everywhere, um, and yeah, it was just unbelievably sudden. Um, And I know that a lot of you are probably saying, well, why the hell are you talking about this? Um, this isn't League of Legends content or anything like that, but I feel like this is actually even more important um, for me to talk about this. And there's three reasons why I'm doing this video. The first reason is I want to do it for myself because my initial reaction, and I think I'm not alone in this, is that to shut down and to kind of turtle up and put up my walls and not talk about it and not acknowledge it and not share it with anyone because you're kind of in this vulnerable state, um, you know, and you're worried that people are going to take advantage of that. But I don't think that's a healthy response. I think that talking about it actually helps. It's painful. It's very painful to talk about it, but in the long run, it helps you heal. It actually helps you heal a lot better than trying to bury it down and stuff it down. So I'm primarily doing this for me, and I'll be honest about that. I'm primarily doing this because I think it's going to help me heal a little better. Um, the second reason is I'm doing it for my dad. Um, he was a huge influence on my life, a huge positive influence on my life. And because he was a huge influence on me, then that means he was a huge influence on this channel. And his life deserves to be remembered. And it would seem unfair for me to not make a video about him because he is a large reason why this channel exists in the first place. Um, and the third reason why I want to make this video is I want to actually do it for you guys, the viewers, the subscribers. Because losing a loved one is a universal experience. We will all face it at some point in our lives, and I hope that this video will help all of you deal with this a little bit better when you have to experience a loss like this, and will hopefully help you realize that you're not alone. You're never alone. Life does go on, and that people have been dealing with these type of tragedies for centuries, for millennia, and really you're not alone. Like, that's the big thing I want you guys to take away from this, is that you're not alone. You're never alone. um but yeah, so the first thing I kind of want to talk about is my dad. I want to talk about who he was and what he stood for and why he was such a great individual. Um, but my dad he was born in the 1940s, and he grew up on the East Coast. And my grandfather was a naval officer, and my dad was the oldest son. So when my grandfather was away, which was often, that meant that my dad was in charge. He was the man of the house, and that kind of instilled in him at a very young age this sense that, family became before him. There was service before self. He had to take care of his mom, he had to take care of his younger siblings. And I think that really impacted him from a really young age. And when he was a teenager, he decided to join the seminary. And for those of you who don't know, the seminary is basically kind of like the training grounds to become a Catholic priest. So my dad was kind of on the road to be a Catholic priest. And yeah, I'm sure you guys are kind of wondering, well, why the heck are you here, Random, if your dad was going to be a Catholic priest? And I'll get there eventually. But what was kind of weird about it is that my dad was never religious. He, both my mom and my dad told me that it was never about religion. The reason why he went into the seminary, what my dad was really interested in was helping people. And within his community and, the people within his life, the Catholic priests were amazing. I know that the Catholic priests and the church has gotten a lot of flack over all the scandals they've had. But within, my dad's community, the best people he knew were Catholic priests. And he felt like they helped people more than anyone else that he knew. And he wanted to be like them. So he went into the seminary to become a Catholic priest because all of the people he admired the most were also Catholic priests. And then he met my mom. My mom and my dad met through church functions, actually, because my mom also grew up Catholic. She was part of a big Irish family. And they kind of quickly became the best of friends. And my dad was basically my mom's confidant. My mom told my dad everything. Like everything that was going wrong in her life, all the bad boyfriends she had, all of that stuff. And they just had this super open and honest relationship. I think that was partially because, my mom didn't look at him like she would look as another boy. She looked at him as a future priest, so he was kind of off limits. So she felt like she could just talk about anything with my dad. And they became just unbelievably close. And after, I think, around about 2 years, they realized that they were in love. And, my dad kind of had to face this really hard choice of, does he leave the seminary or, does he leave my mom? And he wound up choosing my mom, obviously. And they got married. And, with the seminary behind my dad, they had to figure out, okay, well, what do we want to do with our lives? And both my parents decided to go into the fields of psychology because they wanted to help people. They were both very motivated to try and help people as much as possible. And my dad specialized in neuropsychology since that was kind of a new field at the time, and there was very little that was understood about brain injuries and things like that. And my mom specialized in clinical psychology. She did a lot of work with stroke patients and AIDS patients and children who had either disabilities or who were particularly gifted. They basically were just trying to help everyone who they felt like didn't have a voice or who couldn't fight for themselves. They kind of were they tried to be there for those type of people. And it was really kind of beautiful. I think that my parents were kind of the definition of soulmates. They spent pretty much every waking moment together. They woke up together. They ate meals together. They commuted together. They worked together in private practice. They were around each other all day, and at work they came home together. They ate dinners together. They went to bed together. They They were always together. And that's unbelievable that you could spend that much time with a single person and never get sick of them. Um, yeah, it's unbelievable. It really is kind of the the role model that I have that I want to have with my marriage. And I definitely think that I found my soulmate and my wife, and I always actually strive to be like my parents in my relationship with my wife, because my parents always told me that it wasn't marriage is not 50-50. It's 100-100. Each person has to be giving 100%, all the time for the marriage to work. And I really kind of firmly believe that. And I know my wife firmly believes that. And that's what makes our marriage work, especially when we've had to deal with, deployments and moves, with me being in the military, and job changes and all the other crap that we've had to deal with in our lives. We've stayed strong together because we always put in 100%. But yeah, they were an amazing role model for me when it came to relationships. But yeah, let me get back to my dad's life. So, my parents decided they wanted to go into psychology, and my dad decided to join the Navy as a medical officer. My grandfather was a surface warfare officer. My dad followed in his footsteps and was a medical officer. And my dad specialized in treating blast injuries and head trauma. This was during the end of the Vietnam War era, and a lot of people were coming home with head injuries and blast injuries, and those were not understood at the time. Nobody understood how a blast wave could affect the brain. So my dad was kind of a pioneer in that field, and this was also during the same time that people didn't understand fully what was going on with concussions when it came to the NFL or the NHL or professional boxing, things like that. And he was kind of on that cutting edge when it came to those kind of injuries. So my dad got to the rank of lieutenant commander in the Navy. He went into the reserves. He started studying private practice, and then eventually the Navy decided to get rid of most of the medical corps. They had this brilliant idea in the 1980s that they didn't need medical officers anymore. So that turned out to be a horrible disaster. But yeah, my dad wound up having to get out of the Navy. He was forced out of the Navy as a lieutenant commander. He went fully into private practice. And my dad continued to specialize in head injuries and, helping people who have head injuries. And he basically became one of the best neuropsychologists in the entire country. He just was unbelievable. He just knew so much about the field. And he, at different points in his career, he was the head neuropsychologist for the Oakland Raiders, the San Francisco 49ers, the San Jose Sharks, the Golden State Warriors. He was consulting with college sports teams. He volunteered for high school sports teams to help them, develop concussion protocols similar to the NFL. And I went back to my alma mater, high school, because my dad volunteered there all the time, and told them about his passing. And all of the staff there was unbelievable. They told me about how he revolutionized how they thought about head injuries. So all the coaches and the teachers and the parents and the players, he revolutionized how they thought about head injuries and completely changed how people thought about it, because there's a lot of stigma that's associated with head injuries, and he really changed that and made it acceptable, just like a broken arm or a ACL injury or something like that. It's an injury that's got to be treated. You can't hide it, things like that. So he was instrumental in changing the culture at the high school level. And actually my high school is kind of one of the best in the country at both preventing and diagnosing concussions and other head injuries due to sports injuries. So who knows how many lives he's changed just by that. So yeah, my dad, kind of trying to summarize it, was that he devoted his life to just helping people. He just wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves, because if you have a brain injury, like, you can't even function at the most basic level. And he kind of realized that and tried to help people become whole again after they've had, a stroke or a head injury or a concussion or something else that debilitates them, like other brain injuries do. And that was kind of amazing. Um, he was in private practice for over 40 years, and he had thousands of patients, and touched tens of thousands of lives when it came to all the sports teams and athletes and that he talked to, and just unbelievably influential within the greater San Francisco Bay Area when it came to head injuries and concussions and things like that. And obviously, he was a massive positive influence for me. He taught me that I should never feel sorry for myself, and he taught me that you always have to lead by example. That's kind of the Navy way, or the military way, is to lead by example and to put others before yourself. And that was a kind of a huge influence within my life, to always kind of put others before myself, to put the whole over the individual. And he kind of taught me that there's no substitute for hard work. You have to get your hands dirty. It's going to take blood, sweat, and tears to make something happen. And he was all about that. He always had me working, on gardening, or working, in sports or school. He was on me all the time. And, people say, oh, that's me. No, he was teaching me how to be a man. He was teaching me how to be a person of integrity and grow up and be hardworking. And I owe my work ethic to him. Helping me and just push me continuously and make me a better person. He really taught me what integrity was. He taught me to do the right thing. Doesn't matter who's watching. Doesn't matter if you get rewarded or punished. You always do the right thing. You always do what you know in your heart is right. That's what integrity is. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful that he was my dad. So I feel like I need to talk about the end. I've talked about his life, and I feel like I need to talk about his death as well, so you guys can understand what's going on, and hopefully I can relate to some of you who have gone through painful experiences like this, or who will go through painful experiences like this, and hopefully you guys can gain some comfort in me talking about this. So on Friday the 2nd, my mom called me and told me that my dad was in the hospital because of an infection. And she said that it wasn't major, but that I should come up because it would help him recover faster, and she needed help since he was in the hospital, and help her drive to the hospital or help her around the house. So I'm like, absolutely, I'll come up. Let me just go into work on Monday, talk to my boss, turn it over to my colleague, and then I'll fly up Tuesday morning, no problem. And she was like, yeah, that's perfect. That's plenty of time. You can come up and see him, and, everything will be perfect. But that night I couldn't sleep, at all. And it was really freaking weird because I'm not superstitious, and I didn't feel like anything was wrong on the conscious level. Like, my mom said, hey, he's fine. So I believed her. I believed her that she was fine. But I had this overwhelming sense of dread that I could not shake, no matter what I did. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. I've never had that much dread, that much kind of that dropping feeling in your heart and your stomach. It just felt like something was horribly, horribly wrong. And I don't think I slept that night. up at least until 2 a.m., maybe 3 or 4 a.m. I think I maybe got like an hour or two of sleep max. Um, but yeah, I couldn't explain it. And then my mom called me on Saturday, and she said that my dad took a turn for the worse during the night, and that I needed to come up now, not Tuesday, now. So me and my wife, we said, okay, we got to go now. We couldn't find a dog sitter on such short notice. We took our dog, we loaded up the car, and we drove up there. It was like a 6-hour drive. So yeah, we drove through the night. Got to my parents' house around 5 a.m. on Sunday, and then kind of, grabbed everybody, put them in the car, and went to the hospital to see my dad. And when I got there, he was in horrible shape. His eyes were closed. He was not talking. His breathing was extremely labored. He seemed like he was in a significant amount of pain. His heart rate was around 140. His respiratory rate was around 26, which are both extremely elevated. That's what you would expect out of somebody who had just, run a couple miles, not somebody who was laying in a bed. So I could tell that there was serious stuff wrong with my dad. And kind of the nurses and the doctors kind of helped us piece it together. And they basically said that, the cancer was everywhere. It was in his lymph system. It had spread to his bones. It had spread to his spleen, his liver. He had a really bad infection because he was immunocompromised, and his liver and kidneys were beginning to fail because they could not filter out all of the toxins in his body. And because the fluids couldn't be filtered, that kind of broke down that cycle of fluids going throughout the body, and that was causing all the fluid to stay in his extremities, which was causing his limbs to swell. His hands were puffy and his legs were puffy, and it was also causing his blood pressure to drop because all that liquid that was supposed to be in his bloodstream was not returning back to the bloodstream. So his blood pressure was really low, like 90/60. And of course that was awful because all of the really heavy duty pain meds are depressants. They're basically designed to sedate people more. And if your blood pressure is already extremely low, then if you get given those kind of high grade pain meds, then you could potentially kill the person. So the nurses were very ambivalent about giving him pain meds because his blood pressure was so low, and they could potentially kill him. And basically the situation was dire. It was life-threatening. It was the doctors spelled it out to us very clearly, and I was very thankful for that, as they basically said that if he did not improve within the next 24 hours, he had less than a 1% chance to live. And I'm really thankful that they told me that, and and it was painful to hear that, but it was what we needed to hear as a family. So when I finally got some alone time with my dad, I told him everything. Because, me and him had a very open relationship. I didn't lie to him, and I wasn't going to lie to him now. And I knew that the big reason why he was so afraid, and I could tell he was afraid. I don't know how I could tell, but I just knew he was afraid. And the big reason why he was afraid was that he didn't know what was going on. And even though the truth was painful and was very, not what he wanted to hear, I'm sure, it was better than living with the unknown. So I told him exactly what was going on. I told him exactly what was going on with his body, and it definitely helped him. I could tell that it helped him. Knowing is always better than not knowing. And the analogy I used was one for tennis, because my dad was an avid tennis player. He played tennis his entire life, and I played tennis when I was a kid, and I had a lot of fun with it. but I wasn't as passionate as he was about tennis. I don't think I was ever as good as he was at tennis. He was unbelievable. But I told him that it was the fifth set, which is the final set in big tennis matches. I told him that he was down match point. That was the analogy that I used. And I told him that if he had anything left in the tank, now was the time that he had to empty it right now. He had to leave everything on the court. That there was no going back, and that this was basically his last stand, and that he had to give it everything he had, because there was no tomorrow basically. So I just sat there and I tried to coach him, and I basically told him, hey, the first step is we got to get your heart rate and we got to get your respiratory rate under control. With your heart and your lungs working so hard, the body can't focus on anything else. So I said, hey, we got to get that heart rate, we got to get that respiratory rate under control so that your body can focus on dealing with all the toxins that are in your body. And that's what I did. I just sat there, held his hand, told him to focus on his breathing, focus on his heart rate. I did breathing exercises with him. I did meditation exercises with him. I just constantly was saying it, breathe in, breathe out, focus on your heart rate, focus on your breathing. I tried to use my own breathing to try and pace his breathing, everything I could think of to try and help him control it. And kind of miraculously, I knew that he heard me. I know he heard me because his heart rate started dropping. His heart rate started coming more under control. His breathing became less labored. It became slower, more controlled, deeper, clearer. And that was very reassuring that he could hear me, that he was fighting, and that he was trying to get better. He was putting everything he had into it to try and get better. And yeah, his heart rate was at 140 when I first saw him, and he dropped it to 100 over a period of about 6 hours. And his respiratory rate was 26, I think, around when I first saw him, and we dropped it down to about 16. And it was much slower, much deeper breaths, much clearer breaths. He wasn't sputtering or struggling for air or anything like that. And his blood pressure also went up. So his blood pressure was like 90/60 when I saw him, and it got up to like 110/80, which definitely really helped, because that meant like, hey, we can give him more pain meds, we can get his pain under control more, and that allowed him to focus more on his breathing and his heart rate. And it kind of was like this we started rolling in the right direction, kind of snowballing in the right direction to try and hopefully recover. And things were actually looking promising. Like, his heart rate was down, his respiratory rate was down, his blood pressure was up. He was obviously responding to things that I was saying, even though he couldn't really communicate with me. I was hopeful. But that was just kind of the first step, right? The first step is getting that heart rate and that respiratory rate under control. But the real thing that was killing him was all the toxins in his body. So without getting his kidneys and his liver to work and to filter out those toxins through his urine, there was no coming back from it. We had to get that under control. So I kind of told my dad this. I told him that he had to get his heart rate and his breathing under control, and then work on filtering out those toxins out of his body. And I kind of coached him on that for as long as I could. I stayed there until after 10 o'clock that night, just kind of coaching him and holding his hand and telling him to keep fighting as much as he could. And I talked with him, and everybody was exhausted. Everybody needed to get some rest, and I told him, hey, keep fighting. It's all on you. This is kind of our last chance. You have to fight throughout the night if we're gonna have a chance at you making it. So that's kind of where I left him at late, on late that night, late Sunday night. And we went home. Obviously, no one slept well. Nobody was happy. It was kind of a bad situation. And then when we came back Monday morning, things had gotten worse. His respiratory rate and his heart rate had gone back up. They weren't as high as they were originally, but they were definitely elevated. His blood pressure had absolutely nosedived. It was like 80 or 70 over like 50 or 40. And they were giving him medication to try and get his blood pressure up. He was extremely dehydrated, even though they were pumping fluids into him. And what it really came down to was the infection had taken over. He couldn't clear all those toxins and all that nastiness out of his body faster than it was being produced. You know, his liver and his kidneys just weren't able to do it fast enough. And the doctors pretty much told us that there was nothing left to be done. And that was really hard to hear, because we had hope. You know, we're like, hey, you know, even if he's only got a 1% chance, that's still a 1% chance. We were still kind of holding out. And to kind of hear that from the doctors, nobody wants to hear that. And your first instinct is to kind of get angry at the doctors. Like, how dare you give up on them? But they weren't giving up on him. They were, you know, they were just telling the truth. They're just being honest. And I have nothing bad that I could possibly say about the hospital staff. They were all absolutely amazing. The nurses, the doctors, the social workers. It was unbelievable how compassionate they were. Just absolutely unbelievable. I knew that my dad wasn't their only patient, and yet they all took time out of their day to just come in and just sit there and talk with us and be there with my dad, and, you know, make sure we didn't have any questions. And you could tell that the pain that they had on their faces. Like, obviously, you know, they weren't as close as we were since we were family, but you know, this was not something that was easy for them. That they, you know, this was hurting them. They were losing a patient, and they understood the gravity of the situation. They were not taking it lightly. And I kind of gained this massive respect for, you know, the people, you know, the nurses and the doctors who work, you know, with terminal patients every day. Like, I have no idea how they do it. I have no idea how you do it. Like, every day, going in, knowing that somebody that you put all that time and effort into is probably going to die. That's just unbelievable. Like, I don't know how people do that day in and day out. So if you're one of those people, just know that you have my utmost respect when it comes to what you do day in and day out. So, yeah. I mean, even though they were unbelievable people, just unbelievably compassionate and honest and kind, there's no words for how bad I felt. My heart was literally in physical pain. Like, it felt like somebody was literally stabbing me in the heart. It was just unbelievably painful. I've never felt pain like that. I've never had an emotional response that has triggered pain, physical pain like that. And just, it was just a complete emotional overload. It was anger, frustration, sadness, sorrow, helplessness, all, just everything just combined into one. Just this hurricane of emotions. And I felt like I was just kind of like a fucking tree in the storm, like unable to do anything, just try and endure it and weather it. Yeah, and I'm not ashamed to say that I don't think I've ever cried that hard or that long ever in my life. I just hours of me crying and my mom crying and my wife crying and my best friend crying and family friends crying and just unbelievable. Um, and obviously it's hard because, my mom was losing her soulmate. So I wanted to be there for her. And my wife was extremely close to my dad, so I wanted to be there for her. But at the same time, like, I'm struggling because I'm losing my dad, and it's like I don't know if I have the strength to handle all this. Um, yeah, and it was just unbelievable. Just this overwhelming emotions. Like I had no idea how I was going to deal with it, and then this, just something crazy happened. I kind of stepped out. Just got a glass of water, had a little bit to eat because I hadn't eaten all day because I'd just been at his bedside and they didn't allow food in there, outside food or drink in there. And just this overwhelming sense of peace came over me. And I can't describe it. I can't describe why I felt the way I did, but I just had this unbelievable sense of peace flow over me. Just as I had that dread a couple days previously, I now had this overwhelming sense of peace come over me, and I kind of knew, like deep in my soul, that no matter what happened, that everything was going to be all right, that we were going to survive this. Yeah, and I think that kind of was like the first step towards acceptance. They talked with my mom and me, my wife, and made the decision to switch my dad over to end of life care, which was mainly focused on keeping him out of pain. And my dad was surrounded by loved ones all the way to the end. He had me. I was his only child. And my mom, his soulmate, my wife, whom he loved like a daughter. My best friend was there, who was like a second son to my dad. And my mom's best friend, who was also one of my dad's oldest friends as well. And we were all there to the very end, to be there for him. And we all got time with him. We all got to say how much we loved him and how important he was to us. We told him how amazing he was and how lucky we were to have him in our lives. We shared our favorite stories about him. We played some of his favorite music. We were able to actually laugh because we told some of the funniest stories about his life. So we were able to laugh. We definitely cried a lot. We hugged each other. We hugged him a lot. And ultimately, we didn't leave anything unsaid. And I think that's kind of the big thing, is that you can't leave anything unsaid between you and your loved ones, especially at the end of their lives. You have to let it all out. And because we did that, because we didn't leave anything unsaid, eventually we told him that it was okay to go. That we told him that there were no more battles to be fought. There were no more people to be helped. No more challenges to overcome. We told him that he had prepared us for this moment, that we were strong because of him, that he made us strong, that he made it so that we didn't have to lean on him, that we could stand on our own. And we told him that he had done it all. There was nothing left to do, and that now was his time to rest, his time to, that he didn't need to fight anymore. So, yeah, it was, yeah, we told him that it was okay to go. And in my dad's final moments, he opened his eyes and he looked directly at my mom. And, you know, I firmly believe that he just needed to see her one more time. And my mom held him and looked into his eyes and told him that she loved him and that it was all right for him to go. And that's when he died. And he died on his own terms. He closed his eyes and his heart stopped, and that was it. And yeah. So, you know, it was all kind of unreal to think that he actually was gone. And I stayed in my dad's hospital for his room for a long time, just trying to process the emotions. And it was just this whirlwind of all this emotion, but I kept coming back to this same quote, and it was from Winnie the Pooh, of all places. And the quote is, "How lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard." And that's honestly how I felt. When I kind of tried to summarize all my emotions at the end of the day, I just felt lucky. I felt lucky to be alive. I felt lucky that, you know, my dad fell in love with my mom and that I actually existed. And I felt lucky that he was my dad. I was lucky that he shaped me for so many years with his wisdom and his example. And yeah, it hurt that he was gone. And you know, the sorrow and the sadness, it was just physically painful. It was physically debilitating. It was hard to walk. It was hard to talk. But it only hurt that bad because he was so good. He devoted his life to helping people. And I would have just been lucky just to know him. But he was my dad. So that made me truly blessed. You know, that every day I had him as an example to look up to. So, yeah. I mean, I've seen events like these, you know, deaths in a family that just break people. You know, break families, break relationships, just fundamentally break people to their core in a way that they're never whole again. They never go back to the way they were. And yet I know that I'm going to be better because of this. I know that even though this is tragic and that it was horrible and that I'm in a lot of pain right now, I know that ultimately that this will make me a stronger person. And I guess the question a lot of people say is, well, how? How can people have a very similar experience and have two completely different conclusions? And I think that the difference is acceptance. I know that my dad is dead. I accept that he is not coming back. I am done denying. I am done being angry. I'm done bargaining. I'm done being sad. he is gone. But he's not forgotten. And I am so lucky. I'm so very, very lucky that I had the time that I did with him. And I think that what people don't understand is that when an event like this happens, who you are as a person fundamentally changes. You will no longer be the person that you were before your loved one died. Effectively, when your loved one dies, you die as well. And a new version of yourself is reborn. And you have to let the old self die in order for the new one to be reborn. If you try to hold on to what you were or what your relationships were, you're going to be broken. And you're just going to limp on for the rest of your life. And I think that's what happens to people in some of these instances. And I want to make it crystal clear that I'm not advocating that you try to hurt yourself or kill yourself or anything like that. I'm not talking about a physical death. I'm talking about that figuratively, you have to let the old version of yourself die so that a newer, better, stronger version of yourself can be reborn. So, to put it in a more humorous way, tragedies are like enemas. They're not fun. Nobody wants one. And sometimes they're going to be forced upon you. And ultimately, you're going to wind up with two choices. You can either try to hold it all in. You can refuse to let it go. You can insist on trying to live in the past, and you'll wind up feeling like shit for the rest of your life. Or you can just relax and let it all out. Yeah, it's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be messy. You may even get some shit on some people. But ultimately, you're going to feel a whole hell of a lot better. When I was dealing with a lot of this suffering, I came upon this, what I think is probably a fundamental truth. What I was experiencing was a universal emotion. Everyone across the world, throughout history, present, past, future, they've all felt or will feel as shitty as I did in that moment. I was not unique. I was not special. I was not being punished for something that I did or that my dad did. I was not being punished with some suffering that no other person had experienced. What I was experiencing was something that was universal, that everyone felt at one point in their life. And that gave me a lot of peace to let me know that I wasn't alone. And kind of crazily, during those moments, I actually felt united with kind of the entire human race. I kind of felt like this oneness with all of humanity, which was fucking weird. You know, I'm sitting here and my dad is dead, and I'm just fucking tears. I'm a fucking mess. And at the same time, I have this oneness with all creation. and I don't know what to make of it at this point. It's still too raw. It's still too fresh. It was one of the most paradoxical experiences of my life, and I don't know what it means at this point. And I'm not gonna even try to drop some philosophical bombs on you guys at this point. But I would like to sometime in the future. So if that's something that you're interested in, once I've had more time to reflect on it, let me know, and I'd be happy to try and share some insights that I have on this whole experience. But for now, I want to keep it simple. I don't want to try and come up with something deep or meaningful. I just want to try and keep it simple. Regardless of what you're going through, there are thousands, possibly millions of people who are suffering through something similar. It doesn't matter how alone you feel, you are not alone. You are never alone. Do not suffer in silence. I know how hard this is to talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, this isn't the first time that I've had a traumatic experience in my life. It's hard. You're basically dropping all your defenses. You're dropping all your walls. And it's really difficult. And it can be really scary to kind of talk about it with people. But ultimately, these type of traumatic events, these type of burdens, they're too big to carry by yourself. A lot of times they'll break people if you don't talk about it. So while it's extremely painful to talk about them, ultimately that's how you get better, is, through counseling, through talking with either a therapist or talking with friends or family, or doing videos, or finding some way to memorialize the person that you've lost. Anything you can to try and just cope with the sorrow and the grieving process. That's how you heal. You heal by letting it out, not by bottling it in. And yeah, there's gonna be some assholes who try to take advantage of your vulnerability and who call you a pussy, or who try to take advantage of you and sell you some snake oil or something like that. But for the most part, I firmly believe that most people are good-hearted. Like, yeah, there's going to be, 5% of the population are assholes, but most of the population is good. And that's been my experience so far, is that when I'm open and honest with people, I'm usually surprised with how amazing people are in return, how amazingly compassionate and kind people are. So, while I know it's scary, I encourage you guys to open up and talk to people about it. Especially people who have training. Like, don't just open up to anyone. Find somebody who knows how to actually help you, who has got training on how to deal with the issues you're having, or who has been through a similar experience. Because obviously you don't want to get bad advice from somebody or things like that. Definitely seek out trained professionals. No matter what you're going through, there is a trained professional who can help you. The big thing is that they don't know you're there. They're not going to know you're there unless you reach out to them. They need you to make first contact. They want to help you. They just need you to reach out. So if you're struggling with something, if you're going through something horrible in your life, reach out to a trained professional and let them help you. They want to help you. That's what they've devoted their life to. So, yeah. And if I was going to drop some more wisdom, the big thing would be just, try to be nicer to each other. Try to be kinder to each other. I mean, I know that we struggle with that within the league community, but just in general, just not just in league, just in your everyday life, just try to be a little bit nicer, a little bit kinder to people, because we're all suffering. We like to try to think that we're the only ones who are going through a difficult time, but we're all suffering. Every single person you meet on a daily basis, nobody's life is perfect. Everybody has got issues that they're struggling with. And suffering is a universal experience. It's kind of one of the things that kind of binds people together, you know. And I firmly believe that most people are not evil. Yes, there are some evil people, but most people aren't evil. And most assholes aren't assholes. Like, yes, there are a few assholes out there, but most people aren't assholes. Most people are just ordinary people who are suffering and who fuck up and who wind up lashing out or who wind up doing stupid shit. You know, none of us are perfect. And I firmly believe that in most of your interactions, when you run across somebody who you think is an asshole, that person's probably a decent person. You probably just saw them in a really bad light. Yeah, and I'm no different, right? I fuck up every day. Every day I fuck up. And a lot of times I don't even think I'm aware of the fuck ups that I do. But I try to be more aware of the things that I do wrong and the ways that I could be nicer or better. And you know, I'm not gonna speak for you guys, but unless you're perfect, chances are you fuck up too, on a daily basis. And it's really kind of a question of how aware we all are of our fuck ups, because we're kind of blinded to that. It's very easy to see the fuck ups in other people, but it's very hard to see our own fuck ups. And if somebody points out our flaws, we tend to get very defensive, which is obviously not good either. But it's understandable because we're worried about being hurt. So, I mean, I'm not trying to advocate world peace or holding hands and singing kumbaya, and I'm not saying we should, you know, pardon every crime and forgive every enemy. All I'm saying is that when you interact with people like on a daily basis, just give them the benefit of the doubt. That's all I'm asking. Just don't instantly assume that they're an asshole. Just because somebody says something rude or does something rude, don't instantly assume that they're like that all the time. They're just this irredeemable, evil, asshole-ish person, right? Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're just having a bad moment, right? You're only interacting with that person for 30 seconds out of your entire life. You have no freaking clue how that person is the rest of the time. So, I'm not saying that I'm a saint and that I don't do this stuff. I do. I'm not saying that I've had some type of life-changing epiphany and that I'm never going to be mean to somebody ever again. I guarantee you that within a day of this video posting, I'm going to be calling somebody an asshole. I'm going to be doing the exact same shit that I've done previously. And I'll be making assumptions off of someone's character based off of a 30-second interaction I had with them. Because that's what we do as people. You know, we're all freaking human. But I'm going to try not to. I'm really going to try. And I know I'm going to fail. I know it's going to be a constant struggle, but I am going to try. I'm going to try to treat people with more compassion and not instantly jump to assumptions about their morals or who they are as a person. I'm not going to instantly assume that they're an asshole. And I hope you will try too, right? I hope that this video will sway you to make a life change, even if it's a minor one. And hopefully that, you know, you'll try to be a little bit nicer in your life too. I mean, we're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. We're human. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to be a little bit better each and every day. And that includes being nicer to people. And that's not just being nicer to, you know, our loved ones and our friends and family. That's also being nicer to strangers and giving them the benefit of the doubt. So, I know this has been long. I have no idea how long I've been talking, but I know this has been long, and I know I've probably rambled a lot, and I want to end this video with a poem that is very near and dear to my heart. This was a poem that my dad gave to me on my 16th birthday, and I have kept this poem with me my entire life. And whenever I have a rough patch in my life, I come back to this poem for strength and guidance to kind of help me keep pushing on when things don't look kind of hopeless. I recited this poem literally every day when I was on deployment. It was that bad. And I've definitely been reading it a lot in the last couple weeks. It's the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. And it goes like this. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream but not make dreams your master, if you can think but not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you've given your life to broken and stoop to build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and what's more, you'll be a man, my son. Thank you all for your support. I know this video was long, so if you made it this far, I absolutely commend you. This experience will ultimately make me better and stronger, and I hope that this video will help you become better and stronger when you face a tragedy in your life as well. I've thought about sharing more about my life and the small amount of wisdom that I've gained. So if you want to see more videos that are like this and that focus more on life lessons rather than league lessons, please let me know. Just please try to be compassionate towards each other. Stay humble. Always look to help those in need. And if you see somebody stumbling, don't point out their faults. Don't laugh at them. Don't point at them for falling. Just help them back to their feet. Be a person of dignity. Be a person of integrity. Be a person of character. I hope you all have a wonderful day. This is Randomonium, signing off.